everyone, and welcome back. It's Jessalyn, and tonight we will be dreaming in Inuit. The Inuit have so many more words for dream than we do in English, and so I want to explore each one tonight in their native language, which is Inuktitut. Inuktitut means the words they spoke. As we learn each new word for a different aspect of dreaming, we will also explore our own personal dreams and all the different types of dreams that we've had that resemble those the Inuit name. The Inuit are an Arctic tribe. They live in a region, I'll show you, known as Nunavut, or a specific type of Inuit does. Nunavut, I'll show you a picture, way up here in the Arctic. And you can imagine the Arctic is very cold and very dark, and yet is full of some of the brightest lights ever beheld, certainly lights that we cannot see here. The northern lights, perhaps, which in the Arctic region are so intense they actually have a crackling and popping sound at times, a sound that can be described or has been described as frightening by some. They also have a moon that is full and present far longer than it is around here, due to their presence or their position on the earth, close to the celestial pole. And so they are closer in some ways to the night and the sorts of things that our minds do at night. They are closer to dreaming. They also, in the dark nights in the Arctic, would not have entertainment in the way that we might have in areas with bright lights and more foliage. And so dreams became an important form of entertainment. It made stories of one's life and was often talked about in communities with shaman or with the family or with friends or other members of a unit. And so we'll think about dreams in that way, as entertainment, as an important source of meaning, and also as simply something fascinating, another world that exists inside us that we visit when we sleep. Okay, so as we go on today, I will teach you a few Inuktitut words, or Inuit words in Inuktitut. And I hope I have the pronunciations right. I don't have a lot of access to the proper pronunciations of these words, so I'll try my best. Okay, so I'm going to open up my bag and I'm going to get some of the things that we're going to be looking at today. And then I'll talk a little bit about some history of the Inuit and European contact, which is fascinating. And then we'll look at the words themselves. Okay, let's begin by discussing how difficult this environment is in the Arctic, and how European travelers came to know the Inuit because they needed the Inuits' help. The first explorers to really write about this Inuit place, this island of Igloolik, were British explorers who had gone on search for the Northwest Passage to the Asian continent. This was what everyone was trying to do for centuries in this European region. But they really couldn't find one because the area of the Arctic, the Northwest, is so logged with ice that at certain parts of the year it is completely impassable. The only ships that were equipped enough to even attempt such a journey were actually old warships. So it was old bombers that would end up going on these journeys to the Arctic. And as a result, these retired bombers now going to the Arctic in the search of this passage have kind of terrifying names, like Fury or Hecla. And these were the ships that would often get stuck in the Arctic due to the ice and would have to wait through the winter. And when they had to wait through the winter, like in 1822 with Captain Perry and Lyon's crew, they would speak to the Inuit, learn their language so they could communicate, essentially so they could survive. The Inuit have, by necessity, an incredibly close connection to their environment. And again, this is due to the difficult nature of the landscape, the availability of food, the severity of the weather, the length of the darkness that often is interminable. And so Inuit stories and even the interpretation of Inuit dreams is so often connected to predicting game, to determining the weather, in order for these British people to survive, to find food in the case where food is lost, as we'll learn with Franklin's expedition. They would need to speak to the Inuit, communicate with them for the purpose of saving their own trapped lives in the ice. Now, Rear Admiral Sir John Franklin's naval expedition is a famous expedition because it is a mystery what happened to them, though the answer, many say, is contained in Inuit oral histories, essentially, about sightings they had of the missing men. The ships themselves, the Erebus and the Terror, were not found until 2014 and 2016. And in the discovery of the ships, we have discovered, or researchers have gotten closer to what may have happened. But that should give you an idea of the type of region that the Inuit have survived in for over 4,000 years, particularly this island of Igloolik, and how much their connection to the dream world, to a world outside the physical, has helped them survive in those conditions. So I'll repeat that because I think that's important. Their connection to the dream world, to a spirit world, has been essential in giving them the ability to communicate the methods of survival in such a difficult place. Okay, so the Franklin's naval expedition, some of you may have heard of it, was essentially they were going to find that Northwest Passage. Many ships went in search of this and failed until 1906. I believe. But he took 106 people, 129 people in 2 ships with enough provisions to last 3 years, 5 if rationed properly. The names of these ships were ill-fated and prescient, foreboding certainly. They were the Erebus, the Greek god of darkness, and terror. What likely happened, according to Inuit testimony, is that the ships were caught in ice, and Inuit testimony says that they saw one ship literally get crushed by the ice. The ice was so powerful that it crushed the ship from around. So the ice was freezing around the ship, and it collapsed the mast, and it collapsed the hull of the ship, and then swallowed it into the sea. And before the men could get the provisions, those 3 years of provisions off the ship, it was sunk, essentially, leaving the men on the Arctic land to fend for themselves with no food. And evidence from corpses found suggests that they resorted to cannibalism, and even Admiral Franklin's body, when DNA evidence showed that the remains were his, had signs of cannibalism on it. So essentially cuts that resembled the sort of cannibalism. So the Inuit were counted having found at this time bodies missing hands or feet or slabs of fat, essentially. Not a very happy story, but we are talking about dreams and nightmares, so it's okay. And so that's likely what happened was the ships were destroyed along with the provisions, and they were left to fend for themselves. Some Inuit were counted having seen the men, and the men bringing their hand to their mouth, and saying the Inuit word for seal, asking for food. But the Inuit went on, and when they returned, the men were gone. So this is likely what happened. But this gives you an idea of how extreme the territory the Inuit must survive in really is. Okay. The people of the Igloolik Island remained difficult to access, not along the routes of whalers or traders or even missionaries. And so their stories and ways of life were largely untouched until in the 1900s when the missionaries arrived. Today, climate change is altering their centuries-old knowledge, in that the old methods of survival, the oral histories, are no longer predictive of the weather, because the weather is now engaging in different patterns of behaviors. I'm now going to read from Bernard Saladin de Angleur's Inuit Stories of Being and Rebirth. This is a scene that he wrote about his arrival at Igloolik and the nature of the darkness there, to prepare us for a discussion of the words. The sun had disappeared for nearly a week when I came to Igloolik Island on the 1st of December 1971. It reappeared only in mid-January, and very gradually at that. The small village of Igloolik, with its 500 inhabitants, was bathed in a semi-darkness in which only the sources of light were the moon and a few streetlights along the village's icy streets. I arrived on the day of the full moon, and its size, brightness, and omnipresence as it rose and fell in the sky were striking wherever one stood. At midday it was due north, as if placed in the horizon. Due south, a small reddish glow bore witness to the sun's furtive presence a few degrees below the horizon. At midnight the moon was at its apogee, very high to the south, its pale light illuminating the snow-covered ice and land. In early morning it still appeared in the sky, but now to the west on its downward course to the horizon. Never did I suspect it had been circling around the winter sky and not setting for at least 3 days. 19 years later, thanks to an astronomy software package, I discovered that at Igloolik's latitude, 69 degrees north, the full moon rotates around the sky without ever setting between November and February, its path inversely symmetrical to the sun's path in summer, that is, to the north at midday and to the south at midnight. So the moon is full at midday during the Arctic's long winter night. I later established a relationship between this astronomical peculiarity and the moon's prevalence in Inuit shamanism. 2 weeks after my arrival, a new lunar month began under a sunless and moonless sky. Tavijuak, the Great Darkness, is the Inuit name for this time on the lunar calendar, which coincides with the winter solstice and the longest night. This was the time of the Tivajut festival, which featured many contests of strength and singing, games and exchange of spouses. The festival was motivated by a fear of the end of the world and by a corresponding need to restart the cycles of life and the cosmos. The thermometer ranged between 30 minus 30 degrees and minus 50 degrees Celsius, temperatures one could endure with the appropriate clothing as long as the north wind was not blowing. The local administrator had given me a house in the center of the village, of the same type as the neighboring Inuit family dwellings. This was where I would live to conduct my interviews. And so this is where he interviewed people about their understanding of their previous lives, which we'll learn in a moment is a result of a process of naming in the Inuit related to the soul. The Inuit believe that the person has 3 souls. The first is the breath. This is the soul that leaves the body upon death. It is the breath that comes in and out. The second is the tarnik. The tarnik is like a little bubble that is inside all of us, and when we die, the little bubble actually bursts and gives way to a tiny little person, and the person grows and grows and grows and grows, and that person lives in the afterlife. But the tarnik, when we're sleeping, will actually kind of exit the body. It might dangle off of your toe, as one account says, dangle off the toe or float above the body. And so you're very susceptible to outside influence, outside spiritual influence, when you're sleeping, because the tarnik exits the body and becomes more vulnerable. And then the final one is the most interesting to me, which is the name soul. And this is what makes Inuit culture so interesting. Here's a kitty. The name soul is carried in the name. The name is a sort of symbol, and all words are symbols to some extent, but the symbol allows us to speak of the person when they are not there. So your name carries in it your essence. It's the reason we can talk about Jessalyn when I'm not there, or whoever you are when you're not there. It's a symbol that allows you to exist outside the present context in which you are. And so you can exist on the tongues and the minds of others. You can think about when you're in love, what a joy it is just to speak the name of another, of the person you love. Just the name itself can bring you all the good feelings that the person in fact does. So the name to the Inuit is a soul, and oftentimes Inuit children will be given the names of deceased relatives or ancestors. And by giving that name to them, these children will experience and remember their births. They will remember their past lives, because the name soul has now come to another body. So the name has so much meaning, so much beautiful meaning in Inuit culture. Now, how all of this transitions to dreams is obviously the spiritual connection between the tarnik and the dream state. So the tarnik is a place where the dream is a place where the tarnik may travel. And so, let's turn now. I'll turn the camera around and we'll take a look at some of the words and write them down and do our best to pronounce them. Okay? Turn the camera around now. Let's begin with our words. We'll start with Inuktitut. This is the word for sleep. Okay? With sleep, there comes Inuktitut. This is the process of sleep walking. Now, the Inuit believe that when you sleepwalk, you can see things that are invisible to others. So it gives you a sort of sight. I don't know if anyone sleepwalked before, or sleptwalk, or Inuktitut, Inuktitut, sleepwalking. Okay. The next is this word that I can't pronounce. If anyone knows it, by chance? Please say, because I could not find any pronunciation. But this is a very obscure word, which means finding knowledge of animals, locations, while dreaming. I believe it would be pronounced ajuijujug, 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 finding animals while sleeping. There are Inuit tales often of women in particular taking in animals for children, like the polar bear cub, for children when they could not have any. And at a certain point in the animal's growth, the townspeople grow suspicious of it, or want to eat it or kill it, and the mother must defend her animal child. This is common. Animals were the key to the Inuit survival, whether it was a hunt or a dog pulling a sled. And so animals have a complicated place in people's lives there and in their stories. So gaining knowledge of animals while dreaming is so common that it has the name ajuijujug. Okay. The next is another hard one. Nirin Gwartuk. Naringwartuk, which is a premonition of future events while dreaming. So we think of this with right animals here. And hunting. And this one is premonitions. It was common, or is common, for the Inuit to share their dreams. Dreams are meant to be talked about. For one, they are certainly entertaining. But as we can see from here, they're also a key to survival, and their interpretation is essential. Premonitions. Niringwartuk, we can think about one premonition is a hunter. A woman who was hunting for caribou did not know if she was on the right track. And then she dreams a rainbow, and she knows from the rainbow that she is, and she has the courage to continue on through the white, desolate landscape in search of the caribou. It is the rainbow itself that brought her that hope. And that comes to this word, pinguag, which is a dream that becomes true. Pinguag is how you say it, pinguag, a dream that becomes true, pinguag. The next is a very long word. This is very important. Sinak tu mar lug nik. Sorry, there's an end. Lungnik. Sinak tu mar lungnik. Sinak tu mar lungnik. Sinak tu mar lungnik. Sinak tu mar lungnik. Hard word. Sinak tu mar lungnik. Sinak tu mar lungnik. This is nightmares. Nightmares. My dreams very rarely fit into the category of Sinak tu mar lungnik or Niringwartuk. They are usually a combination of nightmare and dream. An example I have is once I dreamed of a house. I'll write it here. Once I dreamed of a house, and it was my house. And I've had this dream several times, so it recurs. There isn't a word in Inuit, I think, for recurring dream. If I have, I haven't found it. But my own dream is that I have a house, and I discover in the house that I have more rooms than I ever knew. And in these rooms are people, and people live in these rooms. And in one, a locked glass room, there is a spirit. And I knew nothing of that spirit. But for a small table, tea table, and a stuffed rabbit that sat at it, I saw this and was too terrified to enter. There was fear, but also joy at having discovered so many new rooms in the house. And so I have dreams often of this. There are dreams, they're very large rooms too, spectacularly large, like ballrooms. And then there are some smaller rooms and strange old kitchens. Lots of old kitchens are found in this house. Old kitchens. Very old rundown kitchens. And very old rundown people. Strange people, the sort who would never have left. These are people who have remained in these rooms, these mystical rooms, for many years. That's a reoccurring dream that I have. A very peculiar one. So that's... I don't know if you have reoccurring dreams, but let's go back to our words. Perhaps that involves what is called the tupilak. This is the malevolent spirit. These might be created by shamans to perform an attack on another spirit or person as they are dreaming. The next word is one that I think is quite popular in modern parlance now. You hear a lot about these sleep paralysis demons. The tupilak would be the sleep paralysis demon for the Inuit. And then the sleep paralysis itself is called Ukmangernik. Ukmangernik. And sleep paralysis is a quite important occurrence in dreams. Ukmangernik, there, sleep paralysis. And the next here is a very long, very complicated word that I've never even heard of happening in English. Kavangnik Saujuk. Let you guess what you think this means. Kavan. Well, let's see if we can say it. Kavangini Kasajug. Kavangini Kasag. Kavan, or is it Kavang? Kavangnik Sajug. Kavangnik Sajug. I can't say it, but this means something so odd. Oh, let me light. This is sleep. This is the process of dreaming. while in the company of others and revealing personal secrets. When I think of this word, I think something of Lady Macbeth. If you remember, she's dreaming and she's speaking and revealing that she is the one who killed Macbeth in dreams. So that's what I think of when I think of this. Lady Macbeth revealing personal secrets. The Kavanganik Sajog. Kavanganik Sajog. If anyone has done this before, please tell me. I didn't know this was a thing, that you could reveal your personal secrets while sleepwalking, I guess, is what it is. And the next, did I already say? I can't remember. Let me look. I thought I already said this one, but let me just check. Yes, I did. Premonitions while dreaming. Okay. So next to me is really fascinating. They have a word for observing someone while sleeping. This is Terliak Sijuk. Terliak Sijuk. That's a word for observing someone while sleeping. And this is actually very bad to do. You don't ever want to do this, because this is when people are at their most vulnerable. So you should never watch someone while they're sleeping in the Inuit, the Tiliak Sinuk. Only a shaman might, to determine if someone is healthy or not. Okay. Our soul in sleep is in a dangerous, dangerous place. Now, I want to read from page, I think, 96 in this. Right. I thought this was an interesting statement from 1929 about the state of sleeping and why such a word as Tiliak Sijuk exists. When a man sleeps, his soul is turned upside down so that the soul hangs head downwards, only clinging to the body by its big toe. It reminds me of Peter Pan and his soul is the shadow that he needs to tie on with a bit of string, right? He has to sew it back on. And so I think about the tarnik kind of dangling out the big toe. This is like Peter Pan. For this reason, we believe that death and sleep are nearly allied, for otherwise the whole soul would not be held by so frail a bond when we sleep. So, the final word is for me the most important part of this video, which is sonic. Which I want to end on because I want to speak about it again. This is the naming process. Giving the deceased the name a deceased to a child, a baby essentially. And this will prompt the child to remember their life under that other name. And so it maintains a connection to the past. To past souls. As if people are living the stories of their ancestors. And they do believe that they remember them. There are many instances in the Inuit of people who believe they remember their past lives. And it is connected so much to the keeping of the name as a soul. And then when you use this name, the soul is brought to a new body. I think it's just a rather beautiful sentiment. Ultimately, dreams help us navigate our environment. And so I wonder how dreams help us navigate our environment. Our environment now is more treacherous socially than it is in terrain. It's our social terrain that's so complicated now. And so I wonder if our dreams can help us navigate that at all, and if we need perhaps some new words to describe it. Good night, everyone. I hope you enjoy.